And now we're going to take a look at the operation of the synchronizer assembly. We're going to use third gear as our example, but other gears would all be similar. Here's our third gear speed gear. On the main shaft, it rides on this needle bearing. So the speed gears are not splined to the main shaft. They're free to turn. What is splined to the main shaft is the synchronizer hub. And it's going to be the job of the synchronizer blocking ring working together with the sleeve and the inserts in order to get the hub and the speed gear to turn at the same speed. So we've got our speed gear in place. One thing a little unusual about this transmission, it does have master splines where it's got wide spots and gaps on the blocking ring, and it also has master splines on the sleeve assembly. So it's going to make the clocking or the orientation of all these components relative to one another critical in order to get proper assembly. Also, we'll notice that the sleeve is not symmetrical and the hub is not symmetrical. So the orientation of all those parts forward and back is going to be critical as well. Now we're going to assemble the synchronizer hub, sleeve, and keys along with the retaining springs. The synchronizer sleeve has to go into the hub where this groove is aligned with the synchronizer insert or key. In some transmissions, this groove is carried all the way around and that orientation is not critical. But this key has to work in that groove. There's a groove right there. We'd rotate it 120 degrees. There's a groove right there. And we rotate it 120 degrees. And there's a groove right there. So that groove has to be centered up over top of our cutout for the synchronizer key. With the sleeve in place, we can drop each one of our keys in place. And then those keys are held in with the retaining spring. Now some transmissions use a coil spring behind each one of the keys, and it would not be possible to use this technique to assemble that style transmission. But now I'll get my retaining spring in here. Oops, my key dropped out. Get that retaining spring to hold that key in place. There we go, and we'll work that around to each of the others. Drop that key into place. And drop that key into place. Now with the one retaining ring in there, it'll hold the keys in for me, so I can gently flip it over and install the other retaining ring. There's only one hole for this ear to go into, so I've got to find the hole for that ear to go into, and then that snaps in behind each key. Now what that does, now when I slide my sleeve back and forth on the hub, it wants to pull those keys with it. And those keys are going to set into these grooves in the blocking ring. And as I move forward on the shifter, my shift fork moves the sleeve pushes against the insert pushes against the blocker ring, and the whole hub and speed gear begin to turn at the same speed. As long as the speeds are matched, by the time the sleeve bridges the clutch teeth on the speed gear, we get a smooth engagement of the third gear. Now if I line up the keys with the blocker rings, get that started onto my main shaft there, tap that into place. And now I've got that third gear assembly in place. I've got to follow that up with a spacer and a snap ring. Snap ring sprung there a little bit. There we go. Then we've got our thrust bearing and the pocket bearing. our 4th gear synchronizer blocking ring, and then our input shaft. Now we should be able to slide smoothly between 4th gear and 3rd gear. So it seems we've got a properly assembled 3/4 synchronizer assembly.